Yeah, so today I want to talk about the state of retreading in Southeast Asia. As David mentioned, Retreading Business is a global magazine. Um, oh, thank you. Uh, However, I'm based in Malaysia. I've worked in retreading in Southeast Asia for the last 5 years. So I think I've got a pretty good handle on the market here and what's going on. As part of this, I written an article about this recently for the last edition of the magazine, and that involved me talking to a number of key players across the region, from Thailand to Indonesia to Malaysia. So today I wanted to kind of give you an overview of what that market looks like now. So without further ado, retreading in Southeast Asia is underrepresented in the global industry. Only 7 of the global Retread Tire Association members are actually from Southeast Asia, so they don't have that global recognition that some retreaders have. I think part of this is down to the fact that a lot of retreading across the industry is family-run, independent businesses, often fairly small operations, maybe 1-2 factories at the most. Some substantially smaller than that. So an individual company in Southeast Asia as a retreader has a real difficult time getting themselves out on the global stage. We'll come to how that can kind of work a bit better later, but that means that there's challenges in establishing a global foothold for the players in the region. A lot of this comes down to a lack of cooperation within both countries and within the Asian region as well. I have a feeling that if there wasn't so much competition between smaller players and actually people bandied together a bit better, we could have better representation. So to give you a bit of an overview of the market, because it is exceptionally varied, no one market within this region is the same. Thailand actually is one of the major exporters of tyres. So 9% of all European tyres sold, this is new tyres, come from Thailand. So they're a bit of an exporting powerhouse at the moment. I've had estimates of anywhere from 10 to 90 retreading factories in Thailand. The data is actually really difficult to come by, and this is all anecdotal from conversations. Indonesia is an exceptionally interesting market because it's super protectionist. It has many restrictions on imports. They have quotas. They have their own standards of tyre. And if you want to sell tyres in Indonesia, essentially you have to set up a factory there yourself. But that's leading to a real degradation of the retreading market in Indonesia. The volume just isn't there. The technology levels are not high enough. And every retreader I speak to in Indonesia says that times are tough at the moment. Vietnam, again, very difficult to get any specific data out of Vietnam. However, when you look at new tyres, you can see that actually there's a shift from China to Vietnam in terms of some of the manufacturing and export. And that's leading to broader use of retread tyres, but it's difficult to put that into specific numbers or context. The Philippines is also very interesting because they've had a lot of government-backed schemes, such as Build, 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 which is creating a massive amount of infrastructure, which, as we all know, infrastructure needs tyres, and that's leading to higher use of retreads. Malaysia is a very difficult country for retreads because the influx of imported tyres from China is so prevalent. There's hardly any restrictions on imports, so the market is essentially flooded. Singapore kind of fits the same criteria as Malaysia. However, Singapore also is a global hub for some of these organizations. So they may not be making a lot of money specifically on selling tires in the country. However, their headquarters are there. There's financial business going on there within the retreading space. And so whilst I was doing this, I was looking at the barriers to growth for this market. The trend for Southeast Asia seems to be that retreading within country is on the decline, whereas exporting of tread rubber is now the kind of the way that they make money. And that makes sense because Southeast Asia is one of the largest, it is the largest producer of natural rubber in the world. I think Thailand's number one, Vietnam's number three, Indonesia's number three. So there's a lot of rubber here, a lot of opportunity to compound that and sell it abroad. But there is a real lack of data, and it's very difficult to pin down within the whole region what is actually going to lead to growth within this market. The reliance on imports, I think, the next presentations you'll hear throughout the day will probably tell a fairly similar story in that, retreading is on the decline because of the import of cheap new tires. However, I think Southeast Asia is probably at the vanguard of that due to, our proximity to some of the biggest exporters of new tires. The European brands, you speak to anybody in almost any country in Southeast Asia now, they'll tell you that the big European and American brands are pretty much non-existent now, which leads to a reliance on imports from China. But what it also means is that in terms of casings for the retread industry, we just don't have enough in each country to be able to sustain the industry. Importing casings from Japan to create retreads in local markets is heavily becoming the norm rather than the exception. And then regulatory challenges and enforcement issues are absolutely critical. If you speak to anybody who works in the retreading industry in Southeast Asia, the biggest thing they will tell you is that we have rules, we have laws about the standards and qualities of retreads, but they're not enforced. So, they may as well be pointless, essentially. Indonesia is an interesting case in point because these rules and laws are kind of used as a bit of a political football. Whether they want more tires coming into the country or less, they kind of ramp up the politics and it does have an effect on the retreading industry. So how can we improve credibility within the retreading industry in Southeast Asia? There is a lack of technology. If you look at some of the most advanced retreaders in the world, Southeast Asia is not up to that standard. There are a few exceptions to these rules, but on the whole, the process is probably still the same process that it was 20 years ago. So bringing in advanced technology, and I think integration of technology within the wider logistics ecosystem is something that could really help. And I think retreaders, some of them already have a lot of technology going on within their factories. However, that doesn't then seep out into the real world. It's, purely for that organization to organize their own manufacturing process. Whereas if that kind of expanded out a little bit into logistics, sales, etc., that could have a real benefit. It's interesting, as a editor of a global magazine, I see stuff coming in from South America, from North America, from the Middle East. A lot of these industries understand that to improve retreading, we can't just be competing with each other. We have to actually be collaborating on a higher level. Malaysia has a very good retreading manufacturers association. However, it still doesn't get the prominence that it needs to be able to make changes at a global or regional level. If all of the retraders within Southeast Asia bandied together and kind of outlined the core reasons why retreading is an industry worth keeping locally, I suspect there would be a bigger impact on the retreading sector. Retreading keeps jobs, it keeps monies in the locality, it's not importing stuff. So the importance of retreading on the local economy, whatever country in Southeast Asia, is much higher than importing. And then I think the third part is sustainability. So retreading for me is almost the original sustainable practice. Companies nowadays are soul searching to work out how they can make their industry seem like it's sustainable. Beer, for example, will have campaigns running to show how beer making is now sustainable. We have the original sustainable industry. We can make claims that we're saving up to 70% of natural resources and raw material from a retread tire over a new tire, but that doesn't seem to seep into the market in the way that it should. A lot of global international companies will have very specific criteria for working with organizations, and that will include sustainability, but on a local level that's missing. So maybe in 5-10 years time we might get to a similar position in Southeast Asia that Europe and the US are at when it comes to sustainable practices, but we're not quite there yet. And I think this is going to have to be led by business. It's not going to be led by government. Southeast Asia is one of the most biodiverse areas on the planet. Globally, if we're trying to save the planet, Southeast Asia should be the primary focus, because this is where all the biodiversity is, it's where all the jungles are, and it's being decimated at quite a level. And if we can do anything to kind of bring that back as a retreading industry, even a little bit, I think that's massively beneficial. And I think that's something for logistics companies, distributors to really kind of look at and say, we want to be part of this sustainability trend, and retread tires is a massive part in that process. So I've explained the environmental significance of Southeast Asia, but I think it's absolutely critical globally that Southeast Asia is seen as an area that we need to kind of focus more on sustainability. I've talked about the challenges of enforcing regulations. It always used to be that a retread tire was massively cheaper than a new tire, and that was a huge part of why we could sell retread tires. However, what we're seeing at the moment, and especially in a couple of countries in Southeast Asia, is we're seeing illegally imported new tires. So all of a sudden, you're not paying import tax, you're not paying any local taxes, so that price can come right down because you don't have the overheads that you would if you were doing things legitimately. So all of a sudden, the gap between potentially legally imported, no tax, new tire isn't that far away from a high quality retread. And what that's leading to is almost a race to the bottom. So people are saying, okay, how much can we degrade our quality before we get into trouble? Or how much can we reduce our price, which also leads to a drop in quality? And if we don't make some changes, if we don't make a shift, it's inevitably only going to go in one direction, and that's down, unfortunately. And the Southeast Asian retreading industry can almost be its own worst enemy sometimes. So, I talk to retreaders about implementing international standards, but all I hear is, that's too expensive, it's not relevant for our industry. However, that would lead to a huge amount of credibility for this region. If we started implementing internationally recognized standards, not only would that have a very strong impact locally to say, hey, look, retreads are safe. We've got the same accreditation for retreads as they do in America or the US. That would be massively beneficial to the region, but it would also open up a lot of opportunities globally as well. As I said, we produce most of the world's natural rubber in this part of the world. If we were to be able to, adhere to international standards and, look at the export market as well when it comes to retreading, there's a lot of opportunity there. But what it needs is people to collaborate, and it needs retreaders to take responsibilities for their own products and making sure that they're at a level that everybody else is at. Technology plays a part in this, but technology again is another one of those areas where you speak to almost any Southeast Asian retreader, they'll tell you it's too expensive. But without looking at the long-term consequences of not making that investment, i.e., you just can't compete with your international peers. I was talking to an Indonesian retreader, and they basically said to me, part of the problem of retreading in Indonesia is that you can retread in Vietnam or Thailand, make a cheaper product, and import it into Indonesia. So, where's this gap that we need to address to kind of bring the whole market in Southeast Asia up to an international level? We spoke about the competition. We spoke about the competition of new tires, and I think that is a problem. And I mean, you go out and have a look at this expo today. I'd say 90% of, if not 95% of the people exhibiting here are new tire manufacturers, and none of them have their own, or not all of them have their own specific retread schemes. So why are the new tire manufacturers and the retread manufacturers not working in collaboration? I'm not sure if this is unique to Southeast Asia, but it is definitely a problem here. I look at South America. They're bringing in specific anti-dumping laws. Those sorts of programs will eventually lead to tighter collaboration between manufacturers and retreaders, because the manufacturer knows that part of their money will be going to the retreader. And I think we need to kind of look at it as a longer term plan to kind of bridge that gap. So supportive regulatory frameworks and financial incentives, I think, are probably critical, but it's very difficult to convince governments here that they need to take action specifically for tires, because even new tires is still seen as a bit of a niche industry, even though it's huge. And again, I go back to my previous point. If retreaders start working together, if they start collaborating with each other rather than competing at a very low local level, i.e., I'm only competing with the other retreader in my town or city, if they were everybody to work together and say, look, we need to come together as either a nation or a region. ASEAN is a tool that retreaders could use to help benefit the retreading industry across the whole region. And then finally, we come down to education and customer perception. So I've written, even before I was editing the magazine, I've written quite a bit about the safety of retreads. You can get data from the US that shows that a retread tire is just as safe as a new tire, because they went out and done that analysis. They went and they picked up tires from the side of the road and said, is this new, is this retread? The numbers were the same. So there's literally no disparity in the safety of a good quality retread, I should add. So why is there perception in most Southeast Asian countries that retreads are unsafe? We hear a lot of bluster about how, in Malaysia specifically, we hear a lot about truck tires and how they're unsafe if they're retreaded. But then there's no kind of body that's going to kind of counter that. And again, that comes back to this kind of collective action to help shift perception at both a regional and a national level, but also with customers. I was thinking about this the other day. There used to be a time when every fleet had its own technician, and they'd have a proper maintenance plan. That seems to have disappeared from this region. There's very few fleets that I go and visit or have been to visit where they actually have their own on-site maintenance team who understand, this tyre needs to be looked after, maintained, it needs to be sent off to be retreaded, it needs to come back. I need to understand what's going on with all of my trucks and all of my tyres. So maybe it's not just about educating the customer, but it's about, educating fleet operators, it's about educating retreaders to say, hey, why aren't you offering value-added services such as fleet tyre management, for example, which could benefit and grow this sector here. So, in conclusion, Southeast Asia has a huge amount of potential as an industry, as a region. We produce the most natural rubber. We've got some of the fastest growing economies in the world. But when it comes to tyres and retreading, we seem to have a bit of a blind spot. And the irony is that we actually have some amazing retreaders in this industry. There are people who are absolutely passionate about retreading, but that passion sometimes leads into more local competition than is necessarily needed, which kind of stops the collaboration. And I think that is where Southeast Asia needs to get to, is a position where all of the retreaders can come together, we can all collaborate, and we can help improve the industry as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that very interesting presentation, especially I think the bit about the need for collaborative action across the retreading industry. I think our next three speakers, who will be speaking on North America, South America and Europe, will maybe have something to contribute about that. I think those three markets are a lot further ahead than the Southeast Asia in that respect. Michael, I'd like to ask, there's some considerable challenges in getting the message across in Asia about the benefits of retreading. What do you think in particular the industry can do to improve the way that retreading is perceived?
I think there's a couple of things. Sorry, I think I'm going the wrong way. I think there's a couple of things that we can do. One is, again, going back to international standards. So to create trust, we need to show that people can trust Southeast Asian retreaders. And I think, any international accreditations that retreaders can apply for and achieve, I think will prove massively beneficial. The second part, I think, comes down to professionalization of the organization. So a lot of retreaders will have a very strong, factory or operational setup, but then stuff like sales and marketing is kind of overlooked a little bit. So the face that retreaders present to their customers, to the outside world, isn't as professional as the operation that's behind it. And I think that is one of the reasons that we have this weird perception that, the quality isn't as high, because it just doesn't look as shiny. You look at a MacBook, and everybody goes, oh, that must be great because it looks nice and shiny. And I think the retreading industry has a bit of a problem of not making itself look as shiny and approachable as it could.
Okay, now sustainability was another subject that you talked quite a lot about. I'd be interested to hear your views on how far behind the rest of the world Southeast Asia is on accepting the sustainable credentials of retreading, and how long you think it's going to be before the region catches up.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, I've spoken to retreaders who say they will go on site at their clients, whether it be mining, farms, agriculture, etc., and they will tell me that they see their clients just digging up the ground and burying used tires. That's it, you know. So I think we've got a very long way to go to help address this problem. Recycling it for me is something that the retreading industry should be taking a huge focus in, because I suspect that's going to be a growth area, and retreaders are perfectly placed to move into the recycling industry for tires, and I think you know, that shift is probably going to still take another 5-6 years, and again, I think that, you know, Southeast Asia needs to find a way to make it profitable to recycle tires and use them again. Because, again, I don't think we're going to get any government assistance in most Southeast Asian countries. So this is going to have to be led by enterprise, by, you know, somebody who's saying, okay, retreading is a sustainable practice. I want to push that to the next level. I really want to move into the recycling industry as well as retreading.
Okay, well, we've still got about 10 minutes left of the session, so we've got a bit of time left for questions. I just wondered if there's anybody out there in the audience who'd like to comment on what we've said so far, and whether there's any questions. The gentleman over there. What I'll do is I'll just take the mic off Mike, and we'll swap around, and Mike can answer the question on here.
Hello, I am Shivam. I have one question. You mentioned that normally earlier there used to be the maintenance team on site available with the fleet in this region, but now it's not there. So what is the reason behind that? Like, are they not finding the value for it, or what changed it?
So I think it comes down to, again, it's almost a perception issue, right? So if you can buy a cheap new tire that you know is single use, right? So what a lot of fleets do now is what I call fit and forget, right? So they fit the tire, they run it until it's dead, done, it's out the window, right? So because of that price differential, it now allows companies to just, you know, throw away, you know, a brand new tire without having to take care of it. But I think it's very short-sighted. I don't think a lot of fleet operators understand how much tires cost their organization as a percentage of their overall operating cost. So if companies were to look at it as an investment, you know, what are the things that you do with an investment? You nurture it, you look after it. You know, if it's tires, you then retread it. So, you know, you're looking for 2 or 3 lives out of a tire if you see your tires as an investment rather than something that is just discardable. So I think, you know, the price of a new tire has had a huge impact on that market, because people, you know, a lot of logistics companies don't think they have to worry about the cost of maintenance, retreading, etc. anymore. So I think that, you know, that's a perception shift that I've seen even in the last 5 or 6 years here. You know, especially with smaller logistics companies, and you have to remember in Southeast Asia, SMEs make up about 80% of the market. So large organizations are rare, even in logistics. So, you know, you don't have that level of professionalism. You know, they might take their tires to a shop to have them checked once in a while, but they don't have somebody, you know, checking the tires in and out on a regular basis, you know, checking their mileage and seeing, right, okay, when does this need to be replaced? When does this need to be swapped with another tire? When does it need to be retreaded? So I think there is that perception now that you can just buy a cheap tire, use it, and then it's gone. So I think that's part of the problem.
Thank you. Can I ask one more question, if it's allowed? So there is another question I'm having is, why Michelin, Bandag or Goodyear? I know, like, they are costly compared to the Chinese or the local make here, but if they set up their retreading plant here and sell the retread tire directly, why they are not investing in this market? This is a big market already.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question, and I don't think it's for lack of trying. So I think all of these bigger companies have tried to get a foothold in the market. A lot of them have even tried to partner with local manufacturers in the same way that someone like Bandag does in Africa, for example. They have tried to do that. But I think the way business is done in Southeast Asia is very person to person, right? It's a very sociable business environment, and that covers Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, everywhere here. So unless you have people on the ground going out and talking to customers and getting in front of them, it's very difficult to have an impact. So what happens is, the bigger companies come here, they set up, they think they can just send someone from Europe to come and run the whole program, and maybe just one person, two people. They don't have that local on the ground knowledge, and then they get beaten by local suppliers. So the local suppliers find it very easy to take on the bigger players because they understand how business works here. They understand that they have to send a salesperson 3 or 4 times a month to go and look at your fleet and analyze it and just be seen in the yard of a fleet operator. And I don't think the bigger companies have adapted their working practices so well for, especially the European and American companies. They haven't adapted those business processes for the Southeast Asian market. And you're right, it is a very big market for them. But you look in Malaysia, even last month, big plants were closing down, and the business is moving away from here. So yeah, it's a very interesting question, but I don't think I know the answer, unfortunately.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's really interesting, actually. I think this basically comes down to how developed the thinking is on fleet management in this market,
Yeah.
and how far down the line local fleet managers are in understanding the benefits of retreading and approaching the business according to the whole life cycle of the tyre and the cost per kilometre concept. I know, Michael, you were running the fleet program effectively for Kit Loong, or doing the marketing of that. This was with possibly the biggest retreader in Malaysia, or at least one of the most foremost retreaders in terms of fleet management. I mean, what were you doing particularly there that was different from others? And what do you think that the retreading industry can learn from some of the approaches that Kit Loong were making?
Yeah, there were 2 aspects to it. One was kind of elevating the brand and marketing. So the ideas became a concept that people could understand better. So again, you talk about CPK. We had other programs, stuff we called Sigma 5. So our Sigma 5 was the 5 key things that you need to do as a fleet operator to improve your tyre lifespan. I think that was one of them. So, being able to put a name to something made it a bit more tangible. The second one was value-added services. So it wasn't just about retreading. It was about the whole life cycle of tyre management. So, it's about getting the right new tyre, as a retreader, bearing in mind that you want to be taking that tyre from them and retreading it in, 6 months, a year's time, right? What tyres are you selling to people in the first place, right? Then, again, the maintenance. So one of the things we introduced was mobile maintenance vans. So for those fleets that didn't have a maintenance person on site, we would send out a van once a week to go and check tyre pressures, for wear and damage, etc. And then that meant that we could actually spot tyre problems before they led to failure. And then obviously the monitoring and management of the retreading process. So it was kind of about extending that tyre life cycle management not just from, okay, you're sending me a retread, I'm retreading it, we're sending it back to you. It's what else are we doing to support you? So, we're selling you the right tire, we're doing the right maintenance to help you prolong the use of that tire. Then we also offered like breakdown services, for if there ever was a fault on the road, we'd go and, repair the tire or replace the tire roadside. So yeah, value-added services, I think, is probably one of the key areas that retreaders in Southeast Asia could look at to help improve their business.
Absolutely. Is there any more questions from the audience, please? Yes, okay.
So thank you for your presentation. I have a question about you have idea how many % of the cost, the fleet operation is for a new tire today in this country that you told me? How many %? And I ask you because in the South America, there is some fleet, the operation is the second, some fleet is the 30, and some company, the fleet is the fourth cost of the operation. Do you have idea?
Yeah, I don't know in terms of a percentage, but generally tires are the second largest consumable for a fleet in Southeast Asia. We don't have what the Americans or the Europeans might call, long haul. Most of our fleets operate on regional haul just because of the size of the nation. So, we don't just have trucks that go in a straight line for 1,000 kilometers or like they do in the US. So tire wear and degradation is higher. We live in a hot part of the world. Again, tire wear and degradation increases due to that. So often tires are the second largest cost outside of fuel. And with Southeast Asia, you have to bear in mind that our fuel costs are actually a lot cheaper than in other parts of the world. So the disparity between first and second place in the US or Europe and here is much narrower. So fleets spend an inordinate amount of money on tires if they don't look after them. So yeah, it's from everybody that I've seen, it's the second cost. I couldn't give you a percentage, but it's a significant part of their expenditure.